Her family forced her to wed her sister's millionaire fiancé in a coma. What happened next shocked everyone. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new dramatic stories. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more heartfelt tales about love, fate, and second chances. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Today's story is titled, Her Family Forced Her to Wed Her Sister's Millionaire Fiancé in a Coma. What happened next shocked everyone. Now, let us return to our main character. The steady beep of a heart monitor echoed through the private wing of Westlake Memorial Hospital. Under the cold fluorescent light, Ethan Carter lay motionless on the bed, his chest rising and falling faintly beneath the thin hospital sheet. The youngest tech tycoon in the state, a man once photographed beside world leaders and luxury cars, now looked more like a ghost of himself, pale, silent, unreachable. By his bedside stood a woman with trembling hands, Lena Parker, his fiancé's younger sister. Her older sister, Isabella, had been the one Ethan was supposed to marry, but a week ago, a car accident had left Isabella in a deep coma. Now, the wedding that was meant to merge two powerful families hung in the balance. Without it, millions in contracts and a major corporate merger would collapse, and the Carters' Ethan's family had made it clear. The ceremony must happen, coma or not. Lena's mother clutched her hand tightly, her eyes red from days without sleep. "Please, Lena," she whispered. "Do it for your sister. Just stand in her place until she wakes up." Lena shook her head, tears already slipping down her cheeks. "Mom, this is insane. You are asking me to marry a man who cannot even open his eyes." Her mother's voice cracked. "If you do not, everything your father worked for will vanish. Isabella's treatment, our home, everything. This is not about money. This is about keeping our family together." Lena turned toward Ethan's still body. Machines surrounded him like silent sentinels. His face looked peaceful, almost unaware of the chaos his accident had created. For a long moment, she could not speak. Her heart pounded in her ears. Finally, she whispered, "If I do this, it is only until she wakes up. I am not stealing her life." The family lawyer cleared his throat and slid a document across the table. "This marriage will be legal in name only," he said. "It protects the Carter estate from outside claims. Once Mr. Carter recovers, the arrangement can be annulled. You will receive full medical coverage for your mother, as well as a stipend for your cooperation." Lena stared down at the contract. Her signature line waited at the bottom, beside Ethan's name already written in elegant blue ink. Her pulse raced. The pen felt heavy in her fingers. Outside, thunder rumbled over the hospital roof. Then she signed. That night, under the sterile light of the chapel, the ceremony was held in silence. Only the family lawyer, the hospital chaplain, and two nurses stood as witnesses. Lena wore a simple white dress borrowed from a storage closet, the hem barely touching the floor. Her voice quivered as she repeated the vows. When the chaplain said, "You may now kiss your husband," she leaned forward, her lips trembling as she brushed them against Ethan's cool forehead. The sound of the monitor filled the silence between them. Somewhere deep inside her chest, a question echoed, "What have I just done?" After the ceremony, the nurses wheeled Ethan back to his private suite, and Lena followed behind, still dazed. The lawyer handed her a small velvet box. Inside was a platinum ring, Ethan's ring, the symbol of a marriage neither of them had chosen. "Keep it on," he said. "For the cameras. The world believes you are Mrs. Carter now." As the door closed, Lena stood alone by Ethan's bedside. She slid the ring onto her finger, staring at it as if it might burn her skin. In that sterile, silent room, she whispered, "I did this for my sister, but why does it feel like I just crossed a line I can never go back from?" The heart monitor kept beeping, slow and steady. Outside, the city lights flickered in the rain. And in the shadows of that hospital room, the most unexpected love story of her life was about to begin. Morning sunlight filtered through the tall hospital windows, washing the sterile room in a pale gold glow. The scent of disinfectant lingered in the air, mixed with the faint hum of machines that had become the rhythm of Lena's new life. It had been 3 days since the quiet wedding, 3 days since she had signed her name beside Ethan Carter's and become his wife in name only. Yet every time she looked at him lying there silent, unmoving, her chest tightened with a strange mixture of guilt and protectiveness. A knock came at the door. The man in the gray suit stepped in the same lawyer who had witnessed the marriage. "Mrs. Carter," he greeted formally. The title still felt foreign, almost heavy. "The board has arranged for you to stay at the Carter residence until further notice. It is important that the public sees stability. The press has already been informed that you and Mr. Carter are officially married." Lena blinked. "You are saying I have to move into his mansion?" The lawyer nodded. "Just until Mr. Carter recovers. Consider it part of the agreement." Later that afternoon, Lena found herself staring out the tinted window of a black sedan as it wound through the hills toward the Carter estate. The city faded behind her, replaced by sweeping lawns and gated driveways. When the car stopped before a massive iron gate engraved with the Carter crest, her hands instinctively clutched the ring on her finger. The mansion was breathtaking white marble pillars, arched glass doors, fountains glimmering under the sun, but it felt cold, like a museum built for people who no longer laughed. Inside, servants moved quietly, their eyes flicking to her with polite confusion. One of them whispered, not quietly enough, "That is not the fiancé, is she?" A tall man in a dark suit approached. His expression was unreadable. "I am Michael," he said, "Mr. Carter's assistant. I will make sure you have what you need. The master bedroom remains locked until Mr. Carter returns home, but the family insists you stay in the East Wing." His tone was professional but cool, as if he were speaking to an intruder. Lena followed him through the endless hallways. Her soft footsteps echoed on the polished floors, her reflection gliding beside chandeliers and expensive paintings she could never afford to touch. When the door to her temporary room opened, she stepped inside and stared. The space was larger than her entire apartment back home. A king-size bed, a balcony overlooking the gardens, a walk-in closet filled with dresses still tagged. On the desk by the window sat a framed photo, Ethan, smiling with Isabella. Her sister looked radiant, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The image pierced through Lena's chest like glass. She turned it face down. That night, unable to sleep, Lena wandered through the silent halls. She stopped outside a locked study door, the faint light of the moon falling on the engraved brass plate. Ethan Carter, private office. For a moment, she imagined him there alive, alert, typing away at his computer, that confident smile she had only seen in magazines. Now that same man lay still in a hospital bed, tied to machines because of a cruel accident. She sighed and whispered, "You do not even know that you are married to me." The next morning began her training to become the public Mrs. Carter. 2 women from the public relations team arrived to coach her. They corrected her posture, adjusted her speech, replaced her modest wardrobe with tailored dresses. She learned to smile for the camera, to answer softly when asked about Ethan, to keep her hands clasped just so. One of the PR women smiled tightly. "The world needs to see a picture of devotion. When they look at you, they should think, she is waiting for her husband to wake up. That is what sells hope." Lena swallowed the discomfort rising in her throat. She was not a liar by nature, but every rehearsal felt like a lie she had to tell over and over. That afternoon, she sat by Ethan's bedside again. The reporters had already left after snapping photos of her holding his hand. Now the room was quiet, filled only with the soft hiss of oxygen. She adjusted his blanket and spoke in a whisper. "They told me I should look like a perfect wife," she said softly. "But I do not even know what you like to eat or what kind of music you listen to. I only know you built half this city, and now you are trapped in silence." Her fingers brushed the ring on his hand, the same one she had slipped onto his finger during the ceremony. "Your world is so far from mine, Ethan. I am just the girl who came to fix her sister's mess. Yet here I am, pretending to belong to you." For a brief second, or maybe it was just her imagination, she thought she saw the faintest twitch in his fingers. She froze, staring. Nothing. Only the steady rhythm of the monitor. She exhaled shakily and sat back down. Outside the hospital window, rain began to fall. It pattered gently against the glass, blurring the city lights. Lena pressed her palm to the cold pane and whispered to the night, "I do not know how long I can keep pretending, but I promised I would stay until you wake up. So please, wake up soon, Ethan Carter. I am not sure I can do this alone." The monitor continued its soft, unchanging beep, as if answering her in its own quiet language. Somewhere in the stillness, the story of a contract marriage was slowly, silently beginning to turn into something else. Days blended into weeks at the Carter estate. The rhythm of the house became a quiet, lonely metronome that measured the distance between who Lena had been and the woman she was forced to become. Every morning she drove to the hospital in the company car, waved politely at the guards, and walked into the private wing where Ethan Carter remained asleep under the glow of sterile lights. Every night she returned to the mansion where silence echoed off marble floors and staff whispered her name like it was a secret no one wanted to keep. One evening, as she arrived at the hospital, the family lawyer met her in the hallway. "Mrs. Carter," he said, adjusting his glasses, "there is one more legal form that needs your signature. It clarifies the division of responsibility between you and the Carter Foundation while your husband remains incapacitated." Lena took the document with a trembling hand. The pages were dense with legal terms she barely understood. At the bottom, her name waited again beside Ethan's elegant signature. She hesitated. "What happens if he does not wake up?" she asked quietly. The lawyer looked uncomfortable. "In that case, the board will review his last will. Until then, you are to act as caretaker of his personal matters, not corporate ones. Everything is temporary." Temporary. The word echoed in her head long after he left. Nothing about this life felt temporary anymore. Her reflection in the window looked like someone else, a woman wearing luxury clothes, moving through halls she did not belong in, pretending to be the wife of a man she barely knew. Later that night, as the rain drummed against the hospital windows, she sat beside Ethan's bed again. She had grown used to talking to him, even though he never responded. It made the loneliness less sharp. "I signed another paper today," she murmured. "You have a lot of those. Maybe that is what being rich means, signing things that decide the rest of your life." She smiled sadly. "I wonder if you ever got tired of it." She leaned closer, brushing a stray lock of hair away from his forehead. His skin was warm under her fingers. For a fleeting second, she thought she saw his eyelids flicker, her breath caught. But when she leaned in, his face was still. She laughed softly to herself. "Maybe I am losing it." Back at the mansion, Michael, the assistant, waited for her in the hallway. His tone was clipped, professional. "The board wants you to attend the annual foundation gala next month," he said. "Your presence will reassure investors. You will be introduced as Mrs. Ethan Carter for the first time." Lena felt her stomach twist. "You mean in front of the media?" "Precisely. You will read a short message on behalf of your husband. Public sympathy keeps this company's heart beating." When he left, she sank into the nearest chair, feeling the weight of the new responsibility. Every step deeper into Ethan's world made it harder to find the way back. The following days became a montage of preparation. Public relations teams rehearsed her speech, stylists pinned dresses, and photographers adjusted lighting for the perfect image of a devoted wife. Lena did everything they asked, but inside she felt hollow. One evening, while organizing files in Ethan's study, she found a worn leather notebook tucked behind a row of framed awards. The cover was cracked, and the pages were filled with neat handwriting. Most entries were notes about his company, Carter Innovations, but one page stopped her cold. Isabella smiles when she talks about her sister. She says Lena paints like she sees light differently. "I would like to see that light one day." Lena's throat tightened. He had written about her, not as a stranger, but as someone he had already noticed long before the accident. She traced the ink with her finger, wondering if fate had already begun writing their story before either of them had realized it. That night, she could not sleep. She drove back to the hospital long after visiting hours, slipping quietly into Ethan's room. The nurses nodded. They were used to her by now. She pulled up the chair beside him and opened the notebook again. "You wrote about me?" she whispered, smiling faintly. "Maybe you saw something in me before I saw it myself." Her voice wavered. "If you can hear me, Ethan, please wake up. I do not want to live someone else's life anymore." He couldn't. The heart monitor continued its steady rhythm, but then a change, a small spike on the screen. She froze. "Ethan?" she breathed. His fingers twitched slightly against the sheet. She jumped to her feet. "Doctor! Someone, please come!" Nurses rushed in, followed by Dr. Harris, the neurologist. They checked the monitors, their movements quick and precise. "There is a response," one nurse said. "Increase the observation frequency." Lena stood back, her hands over her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. For the first time since the wedding, hope filled the sterile air. Dr. Harris gave her a cautious smile. "It could be nothing, or it could mean he is fighting to come back. Keep talking to him. Sometimes they respond to familiar voices." When the room cleared, she sat again and reached for Ethan's hand. "You heard me, did you not? You always do the impossible." Her thumb brushed his knuckles gently. I will be here every day until you open your eyes. Outside, dawn crept over the city skyline. The light filtered through the hospital window, soft and new. Lena looked at the sleeping man beside her and whispered, "Maybe our story is not a lie after all. Maybe this was how it was meant to begin." The heart monitor answered with its slow, steady rhythm, stronger now, as if agreeing with her in silence. A week later, the impossible happened. Ethan Carter opened his eyes. It began with a hoarse, broken gasp that startled the nurse on duty. The steady rhythm of the monitor quickened, and Lena, who had fallen asleep in the chair beside him, shot upright. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming, but then his fingers moved again, curling weakly against the blanket. "Ethan?" she whispered, her voice trembling. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and glassy under the dim hospital light. He blinked, disoriented, his throat dry. "Where am I?" Lena leaned closer, tears spilling before she could stop them. "You are in Westlake Memorial Hospital. You have been in a coma, but you are safe now." He stared at her, confusion tightening his brow. "Who are you?" The question struck her like a blade. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Before she could answer, Dr. Harris entered with a team of nurses. "Mr. Carter," he said calmly, "do not try to move. You have been unconscious for 6 months. We need to take things slowly." Ethan's voice was raspy. 6 months? What happened to my fiancée Isabella? Lena froze. The air left her lungs. Dr. Harris hesitated, glancing at her before answering. She is still recovering." Then his tone shifted. "We can discuss everything later. For now, you need rest." As they examined Ethan, Lena stepped back, heart pounding. He did not know about the arrangement. He did not know that, legally, she was his wife. When she returned to the mansion that night, the corridors felt even colder than before. Michael, the assistant, was waiting near the stairs. "I heard the news," he said. "Congratulations, the doctors say he will recover fully." Lena nodded numbly. "Yes, but he does not remember anything, including me." Michael's expression softened slightly. "Then you will have to remind him who you are. The board will expect a public statement soon. They will want the perfect couple back in the headlines." She wanted to scream that none of this was perfect, that it was built on lies. But she said nothing. The next morning, Lena returned to the hospital. Ethan was awake, sitting up with the help of pillows, his face pale but alert. When he saw her enter, his eyes narrowed slightly. "You were here before," he said. "The nurse told me you never left my side." "Why?" Lena forced a smile. "Because you needed someone." His gaze lingered on her, searching for something he could not name. "You seem familiar," he said slowly, "but I cannot place you." She wanted to tell him everything, that she had married him under pressure, that she had done it for her sister, that she had stayed because she could not walk away. But Dr. Harris had warned her not to overwhelm him too soon. So she simply said, "I am someone who cares." Over the next few days, Ethan began physical therapy. His legs were weak, his hands trembled, but his determination was fierce. Lena stayed close, helping him walk the short distance from the bed to the window. Each step he took felt like a small victory. "Why are you helping me?" he asked one afternoon, his voice stronger now. "Because you deserve a chance to start over," she said. He looked out at the city skyline beyond the glass. "You talk like you know me." "I do," she whispered. Later that week, Ethan was discharged from the hospital and returned to the Carter estate. The press covered the event relentlessly, the miracle recovery of Ethan Carter. Cameras flashed as the car pulled up the driveway. Lena stood by his side, smiling for the photographs, her hand lightly resting on his arm. To the world, they were husband and wife. To him, she was still a stranger. Inside the mansion, Ethan moved slowly through the halls, rediscovering a world that felt both familiar and foreign. He paused by a painting in the foyer, a portrait of him and Isabella. "She looks like you," he said quietly. Lena's heart twisted. "She is my sister." He turned to her sharply. "Your sister?" She nodded. "You knew her before the accident." Something flickered behind his eyes, pain, recognition, confusion. "Then why are you here?" She hesitated. "Your family asked me to help. It was supposed to be temporary." "Temporary," he repeated, his tone unreadable. "But everyone calls you Mrs. Carter." Lena swallowed hard. "It is complicated." He studied her for a long moment. "I see." Then he walked away, leaving her alone in the echoing hallway. That night, as rain pattered against the windows, Ethan could not sleep. He wandered into his study, where a leather notebook sat open on the desk, the same one Lena had once read. His fingers traced the familiar handwriting, and his eyes stopped at the page about her. "I would like to see that light one day." He frowned, his heart pounding with a strange ache. He remembered the way she had spoken to him in the hospital, the warmth in her voice, the tears she thought he did not see. Down the hall, Lena stood at her balcony, staring into the storm. Somewhere inside the house, a light turned on in Ethan's study. She whispered to herself, "You are awake now, Ethan Carter. Maybe this is where the real story begins." And in that vast, lonely mansion, two people bound by a lie were about to discover what truth really felt like. The following weeks felt like walking on a fragile bridge suspended between truth and pretense. Ethan was recovering faster than anyone had expected. He could walk again, attend meetings with his doctors, and even take short strolls through the gardens of the Carter estate. Yet, between him and Lena, an invisible wall still stood built from secrets neither of them dared to break. Every morning, she helped him with breakfast and therapy, acting the part of a devoted wife under the watchful eyes of the staff. Every night, she returned to her room on the far side of the mansion, replaying the day's conversations in her head and wondering when she would have the courage to tell him everything. One afternoon, Michael entered the drawing room with a folder in his hands. "Mr. Carter," he said, "the board has confirmed the date for the annual gala. They are expecting you and Mrs. Carter to attend together. It will be your first public appearance since the accident." Ethan glanced up from his chair, his expression guarded. "Do I have a choice?" "Not if you want to maintain confidence in the company," Michael replied. "They are already printing the invitations." After he left, Ethan turned toward Lena, who stood by the window. "So it begins," he said softly. "Another performance for the cameras." Lena hesitated. "You do not have to do this if it feels wrong." He looked at her carefully. "Do you feel wrong pretending to be my wife?" The question hung between them like a live wire. She took a slow breath. "I never meant to lie to you, Ethan. I was only trying to help your family, and mine." He nodded once, but his eyes held something unreadable. "Then let us give them a show they will never forget." The night of the gala arrived with flashing cameras and glittering lights. The ballroom was filled with the city's elite investors, socialites, journalists, all eager to see the miracle man who had survived the impossible. Ethan stood tall in his black tuxedo, every trace of the hospital erased from his appearance. Beside him, Lena wore a silver gown that shimmered like moonlight. Her heart pounded as the MC announced their arrival. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. and Mrs. Ethan Carter." The crowd erupted into applause. Flashbulbs went off in every direction as they stepped onto the stage. Ethan took her hand gently, guiding her up the stairs. To the world, they looked like the perfect couple. Beautiful, composed, untouchable. Lena's palms were damp with nerves. She whispered under her breath, "What do I say if someone asks about Isabella?" Ethan's voice was calm. "Tell them the truth, that she is resting and you are helping the family. That is close enough." When it was time for her to speak, Lena took the microphone. Her voice trembled at first, but she steadied herself. "On behalf of my husband and the Carter Foundation, I want to thank everyone who stood by us through difficult times. Recovery is never a journey taken alone. It is made possible by kindness, by patience, and by hope." The room fell silent, moved by her sincerity. Even the photographers lowered their cameras for a moment. As the applause returned, Ethan reached for her hand again. His fingers lingered on hers a second longer than necessary. "You have a way with words," he said quietly. "You sounded like someone who believes every one of them." She met his gaze. "Maybe I do." Later that evening, after the speeches and toasts, the orchestra began to play a slow waltz. Couples moved gracefully onto the dance floor. Ethan looked at her. "Do you dance, Mrs. Carter?" She shook her head quickly. "Not in public." He smiled faintly and extended his hand. "Then let us make tonight the first." Her breath caught as he led her onto the floor. The world blurred into soft lights and music. His hand rested lightly on her waist, guiding her with effortless ease. She felt his heartbeat through the fabric of his suit, steady and real. For a few minutes, the pretense melted away. They were not husband and wife by contract. They were simply two people who had found each other through impossible circumstances. When the song ended, the applause rose again, but this time, it felt distant. All Lena could hear was the quiet whisper that left Ethan's lips. "Thank you for staying." Her eyes stung. "You do not have to thank me." "I do," he said, "because I think I am beginning to remember more than I should." Her breath hitched. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Maybe it is nothing, but when I see you, something feels familiar, like I have known you longer than I should have." She looked down, afraid that the truth would spill out if she met his eyes. "Maybe some memories never leave us," she said softly. That night, long after the gala ended and the guests had gone, Lena stood alone in the grand hall, gazing at the empty floor where they had danced. The moonlight streamed through the tall windows, silvering the marble beneath her feet. Somewhere behind her, she heard his voice. "You looked beautiful tonight." She turned. Ethan stood in the doorway, his tie loosened, his eyes softer than she had ever seen them. "Thank you," she said quietly. He stepped closer, his voice low. "You saved me once, Lena. Maybe it is time I start finding a way to save you too." And for the first time since the day she signed that impossible contract, she smiled without guilt. The line between duty and love was beginning to blur, and neither of them seemed ready to stop it. The days following the gala carried a strange, quiet glow that Lena could not explain. The tension that had once filled the Carter mansion began to soften, replaced by an uneasy peace. Ethan had started to spend more time outside his office, joining her for breakfast, asking about small details of the world he had missed during his coma. He still did not remember everything, but each conversation seemed to bring him closer to her. One morning they sat together on the terrace overlooking the gardens. The air was cool, and the sun was still low on the horizon. Lena poured him a cup of coffee and smiled when he grimaced after the first sip. "You hate sugar in your coffee," she said quietly, setting the spoon aside. "You used to take it black." He looked at her with mild surprise. "How would you know that?" She froze for a moment before answering. "Your assistant told me." Ethan leaned back in his chair, studying her face. "It is strange," he said. "When I look at you, I feel like I should remember more, but it comes in flashes. Your voice, the smell of paint, the sound of rain. It feels familiar." Her heart tightened. "Maybe your memory is just finding its way back." He smiled faintly. "Or maybe fate has a strange sense of humor." They shared a quiet laugh. For the first time, it did not feel forced. Later that week, Ethan insisted on visiting his company headquarters. Michael and the board had warned him to take it slowly, but he refused to sit idle. "I need to see what I built," he told Lena. She accompanied him, her presence meant to reassure both the employees and the investors. When they entered the lobby, hundreds of staff members clapped, their cheers echoing off the glass walls. Ethan nodded politely, but his grip on Lena's hand tightened as the flashes of cameras filled the room. "I forgot how loud the world can be," he murmured. As they toured the building, Ethan's steps faltered near the art gallery that showcased pieces from the Carter Foundation. On the wall hung a painting, an unfinished portrait in soft pastels. It was signed L. Parker. He stopped and stared at it. "L. Parker?" he repeated quietly. "That is you, is it not?" Lena swallowed. "Yes. It was something I made before." She stopped herself. "Before what?" he asked gently. "Before everything changed," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned back to the painting. "It is beautiful. It feels like peace and chaos all at once." Then he glanced at her. "Just like you." Her breath caught. "Ethan!" But before she could say more, Michael appeared with a group of executives, his tone brisk. "Mr. Carter, the press is waiting upstairs. We need to discuss the next quarter's recovery plan." Ethan nodded but cast one last glance at her before leaving. That evening, as the mansion settled into silence, Lena walked past the study and saw Ethan sitting alone, staring at the same leather notebook she had once found. His fingers traced the lines of writing slowly, almost reverently. "You wrote this before the accident," she said softly, stepping inside. He looked up. "So you have seen it." "I found it while cleaning your office," she admitted. "I read the part about Isabella and about me." He met her chaza. "Then you know that I admired you long before any of this happened." Her lips parted in disbelief. You did?" He nodded. "I remembered your name because she spoke of you often. But now I think I remember your face. You were at one of our charity events." You gave a speech about art therapy for children. You looked so nervous, but when you spoke, the whole room went quiet. Lena pressed a hand over her heart. I did not think you would even notice me. I noticed, he said softly, and I never forgot. The air between them thickened with a warmth that neither of them could deny. Ethan reached across the desk, his fingers brushing hers. I do not know what happened while I was asleep, Lena. I only know that when I woke up, you were there. Maybe that means something. Before she could answer, the phone on the desk rang sharply, breaking the moment. Ethan answered, listening intently. His expression shifted from calm to confusion. What do you mean the board is questioning the legitimacy of my marriage? He said, his tone tightening. Who leaked this? Lena felt the blood drain from her face. Ethan's eyes flicked toward her, searching for answers. When he hung up, silence filled the room. They are saying our marriage certificate was signed under false pretenses, he said slowly. That it was arranged while I was incapacitated. Lena's hands trembled. Ethan, please let me explain. He stood abruptly. Explain? How can I explain this to the world when I do not even understand it myself? Tears welled in her eyes. I never meant to deceive you. I was forced into it. Your lawyer said it was to protect the company. My mother begged me. I thought it would only last until Isabella woke up. His jaw tightened. So it was all a lie. No, she said, her voice breaking. Not all of it. He turned away, unable to look at her. I need time to think. That night, Ethan locked himself in his study, replaying everything he had learned. The pieces began to fall into place, the photographs, the secrecy, the way everyone treated Lena with cautious respect. It was all true. She had married him while he lay in a coma. Down the hall, Lena sat on her bed, clutching the ring on her finger. Her tears soaked the contract that had once bound her to him. She whispered into the darkness, I never wanted your name, Ethan. I only wanted to protect what mattered to both of us. Outside, thunder rumbled again, just as it had the night she signed the papers. But this time, the storm was not outside, it was inside the Carter mansion, waiting for the truth to strike. The next morning, the Carter estate was no longer quiet. News vans lined the street outside the gates, cameras flashing through the iron bars. Every channel was repeating the same headline, Fake Marriage Scandal at Carter Industries. Ethan sat in the library, staring at the television in silence. His face was pale, unreadable. The anchor's voice filled the room. Sources claimed that the woman living in the Carter mansion was never truly Ethan Carter's fiancé. Documents suggest she is actually Isabella Parker's younger sister, posing as his wife while the real bride remains in a coma. Lena stood at the doorway, her heart pounding. She wanted to run to him, to explain again, but he did not look up. His voice was low and cold. They are right, are they not? She swallowed hard. Yes, but it was never meant to be permanent. It was supposed to protect you, your company, until you recovered. Ethan rose slowly from the chair. You should have told me the truth the moment I woke up. I tried, she said, her voice trembling. You were weak. You did not remember anything. I thought telling you then would destroy you. He stared at her for a long, heavy moment. It destroyed me anyway. Before she could speak again, Michael entered the room, his face tight with urgency. Mr. Carter, the board has called an emergency meeting. They want to suspend you until this is resolved. Ethan exhaled sharply. Of course they do. He turned back to Lena, his tone softer but still distant. You should leave, Lena. The press will only make it worse. She shook her head. I will not leave you to face this alone. He looked away. You already have. The words hit harder than any headline. She turned and fled the room, the echo of her footsteps chasing her down the marble hall. By afternoon, the scandal had reached every major outlet. Commentators debated whether the marriage was fraud or manipulation. Strangers online called her a liar, a gold digger, a thief of identity. Lena watched the chaos unfold on a small television in her room, tears streaming down her face. She had wanted to protect everyone, but instead, she had ruined everything. Meanwhile, Ethan faced the board. The conference room buzzed with tension. This deception has damaged the company's reputation, one member said sharply. Investors are demanding answers. Ethan listened quietly, then stood. You are right. The deception was real, but it was not hers alone. The room fell silent. I was the one who signed those contracts. I am responsible for what happens under my name. Michael frowned. But Ethan cut him off. She did what she was told to do by people who thought they were saving this company. If anyone is to be blamed, it is me. The board members exchanged glances. The meeting ended with no decision, but the damage was done. That night, Lena packed her few belongings. She paused by the window one last time, looking out at the gardens that had once felt like a dream. When she turned, Ethan stood in the doorway. His voice was quiet, almost tired. Leaving? She nodded. It is better this way. He stepped closer. And where will you go? Home, she whispered, back to being no one. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the ring, the same one she had worn on their wedding day. You forgot this, he said softly. Her eyes filled with tears. It never belonged to me. He looked at her, the mask of anger finally breaking. Maybe it did. Maybe I just did not realize it soon enough. She shook her head, forcing a small smile. Goodbye, Ethan. As the door closed behind her, the house seemed to lose all warmth. Ethan stood alone in the silence, holding the ring in his palm. The woman who had once been his fake wife had walked away. But the truth she left behind burned brighter than any lie ever could. Days turned into weeks after Lena left the Carter mansion. The news cycle eventually shifted to fresher scandals, but the damage remained. The Carter empire had survived the storm, yet Ethan's life felt hollow, stripped of the one person who had stood by him when the world had turned its back. He returned to his daily routine meetings, phone calls, polite smiles, but every corner of the mansion echoed with her absence. At night, he found himself sitting in the same hospital chapel where their strange wedding had taken place. The faint scent of lilies still lingered, and the memory of her trembling voice as she said her vows haunted him. He had once believed those words were empty, but now he realized they were the only truth he had ever known. Meanwhile, Lena had moved back to her small apartment on the outskirts of the city. The neighborhood was noisy, the walls thin, but at least it was hers. She returned to teaching art classes at the community center, using the same brushes and paints she had owned before everything began. Her students were kind. None of them recognized her as the woman from the scandal. She preferred it that way. Still, she could not stop herself from checking the news once in a while. She saw pictures of Ethan attending charity events alone, his expression calm but distant. She wondered if he ever thought of her, or if she had simply been a chapter he wanted to forget. One rainy afternoon, as she cleaned the paint trays after class, a familiar voice echoed behind her. You still talk to your paints when no one is around. Her hand froze midair. She turned slowly. Ethan stood in the doorway, drenched from the rain, his suit jacket dark with water. He looked exhausted but alive in a way she had not seen since before everything fell apart. Ethan, she breathed, unable to believe her eyes. What are you doing here? He smiled faintly. I came to return something. He reached into his pocket and placed the platinum ring on the table beside her. I do not think this ever belonged to my company. It belonged to us. Her heart twisted. Why would you bring it back? Because I finally remembered, he said softly. The night you signed the papers, the day you held my hand in that hospital room, I remember your voice. You were the only person who ever spoke to me like I was still human. She shook her head, tears forming. You do not owe me anything, Ethan. I know, he said. That is why I am here. I do not owe you. I choose you. The words struck deeper than any apology. Lena covered her mouth, struggling to speak. Why now? Because the truth deserves to live in the open, he said. Tomorrow, I am holding a press conference. I am going to tell the world everything about the contract, about the mistake, about you. You deserve to be seen for who you really are, not what they made you out to be. She shook her head in disbelief. That could ruin you. He stepped closer, rain still dripping from his hair. Maybe, but some things are worth losing everything for. For a long moment, the world outside disappeared. The sound of rain softened, the classroom lights flickered, and time seemed to hold its breath. Ethan reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. You once said you wanted to paint something real, so here I am. No contracts, no lies, just me. Her tears finally fell. I do not know if I can do this again. He smiled gently. Then do not decide tonight. Just promise me you will come tomorrow and see what truth looks like when it finally has a voice. She looked down at the ring on the table, the symbol of everything that had broken and everything that could still be mended. When she looked back up, Ethan was still there, waiting not as a CEO or a husband by law, but as the man who had chosen her freely. For the first time in months, Lena let herself hope. The storm that had torn them apart was giving way to something softer, something that might finally be called forgiveness. The next morning dawned clear after a night of rain. The city skyline glimmered under the sunlight, washed clean as if it too was ready for a new beginning. Lena stood outside the Carter Foundation building, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched the strap of her worn purse. She had not planned to come, but Ethan's words from the night before echoed in her mind. See what truth looks like when it finally has a voice. Inside, the conference hall was filled with reporters and flashing cameras. Ethan stood at the podium, dressed in a dark suit, calm and resolute. When he spotted her near the entrance, his expression softened, and a faint, reassuring smile appeared. He began to speak. I owe the public the truth, he said, his voice steady. Months ago, when I was in a coma, my family made choices they believed would protect this company. In doing so, they asked someone extraordinary to bear a burden that was never hers. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Ethan continued. Lena Parker married me under circumstances that were far from ordinary. She did not do it for money or fame. She did it to honor her sister, to keep a promise, and to save lives, including mine. Everything I have today, I owe to her courage and her kindness. Lena's eyes burned with tears she tried to hide. Cameras turned toward her, but for once, she did not look away. Ethan stepped down from the podium and crossed the stage to stand beside her. I was angry when I found out, he said quietly, his voice carrying through the hall. But then I remembered what she had done for me before I ever opened my eyes. She believed in me when I could not believe in myself. The room was silent now. Every reporter seemed frozen, waiting for what would come next. Ethan turned to her, his tone soft but sure. So today, I am asking her not as the man who was forced to marry her, but as the man who now knows what love truly means if she would start over with me. Lena's breath caught. Her heart raced as he reached into his pocket and revealed the same ring she had once returned. The world around them blurred into silence. She whispered, You are serious? He smiled gently. Completely. The hall erupted in flashes and murmurs, but Lena barely noticed. Her tears spilled freely now as she nodded through her trembling smile. Then, yes, but this time, no contracts. Ethan laughed softly. Only promises. He slipped the ring back onto her finger, and the room filled with applause, not for a scandal, but for redemption. Outside, the rain clouds had vanished, leaving a sky so blue it seemed unreal. As they stepped out into the sunlight together, Lena whispered, I was forced to marry you once, Ethan Carter, but this time, I choose to love you. He squeezed her hand gently. And I choose to spend the rest of my life proving that love is real. Oh. The cameras kept flashing, but for the first time, neither of them cared. The truth had set them free. And this time, their story was not built on a contract, but on choice and the promise that love, when honest, is the most powerful truth of all.